Hi, this is Dan Bullard on the river, retired electronics engineer, sitting on the front deck of my houseboat again, and it's great. I didn't want to bore you to tears with harmonics, and so I thought I'd talk about QAM. QAM, bam, thank you, ma'am. QAM is everywhere. TVs, cell phones, everything uses QAM. Everything. Wi-Fi. And why is that? Well, FM kind of sucks. I mean, FM sounds good, but spectrally FM sucks. And AM is really subject to noise and stuff, but then again, it's got a lot of positive benefits, as you'll see. And QAM adds another dimension to AM. And back in the olden days, I used to work on AM. We transmitted messages from the transmitter site in Exmouth, Western Australia, using AM. And I did that stuff at 40 kilowatts. I wasn't pussyfooting around. It was great shit. Now, unlike most of my videos, I'm not just going to talk about stuff. I'm going to tell you where you can go to experiment with this stuff. If you're any kind of an engineer, you should be able to fire up Excel and do some stuff. And I will give you a link to a place on my website where you can download an Excel spreadsheet that does QAM. And it's really cool, and you can learn a lot from it. And you can do your own experiments and make your own changes, and who knows, maybe you'll come up with a new modulation technique. QAM was kind of like, it was just an addition to AM, and it kind of came out of, as far as I know, it kind of came out of color televisions. And when I went to school, I went to college for a year, I learned about quadrature modulation a little bit so that I could fix TVs. And so my career choices were going to be fixing TVs or going in the Navy. Well, my instructor made it sound like the Navy was kind of a fun thing to do, so I went in the Navy and I learned about all kinds of stuff, but I didn't learn about QAM. I learned about AM and all that, but I never did get into QAM. But QAM adds a dimension to AM. AM, amplitude modulation, simply modulates the amplitude of a signal, kind of like my smart card amplitude shift keying thing. But QAM adds another dimension, and so let's say that you came up with a digital scheme that gave you, let's say, 8 bits of digital in AM. You do QAM, what's 8 times 8? 8 times 8 is 64. So you suddenly get 64 different states. That's really cool. So you can really boost the data carrying capacity of your channel just by going from AM to QAM. Now, a lot of people like to think about AM in the time domain, and that's wonderful, but it's not. QAM is, don't think about QAM in time domain. It's stupid. Yeah, we're changing the phase, but just ignore that. That's ridiculous. Don't even think about it that way. Think about it from the perspective of frequency domain and complex math. Complex math will let you do all kinds of interesting things that you can't see in time domain. And that's what we do. We do it all in complex math. So if you haven't done complex math in Excel, you're about to start. And don't worry, it's not too hard. It's pretty easy. And they call it complex math for a reason, okay? Because it's complex. Now, I wrote an article called QAM for Dummies on LinkedIn, and I didn't back this one up. So if LinkedIn deplatforms me, you're SOL. But that's okay. You'll figure it out if you go find my link at www.danbullard.com/dan/DSP and go look around, and you'll find the article on QAM. And the link to the Excel file. And there's a link that takes you in and lets you download the Excel file and explains to you how to use it. And it's really cool. It's slow. Excel is slow in doing frequency domain stuff. When you do an FFT or an inverse FFT, you have to do both. You have to do an inverse FFT, then you have to do an FFT, and you'll get the data out. But it's slow, but it works, and so you can see it. It's a whole lot better than theorizing, oh, I'm thinking about QAM. No, that's ridiculous. Go learn about it by doing it. Now, it does make a lot of sense to go in and figure it out using Excel, and I had to do it from scratch. I didn't know how QAM worked. I guessed. I'd been doing QAM for years, but I never actually learned about it until I was employed by TeraWave, who was doing a new modulation algorithm, and I wanted to compare theirs against QAM. And QAM wins. Sorry, guys. So in QAM, we do it in frequency domain, and you probably have seen this picture I'm going to show you of a constellation. That's a constellation of I versus Q, okay? I and Q are the two complex products that you deal with, and so we're dealing with I versus Q, and that's how, in this case, we have 4 bits of data that we can specify in AM, but if we were in QAM, that turns into 4 by 4 is 16. So 16 bits of data can be transmitted using this really simple little trick that I did in Excel. Okay, now the Excel file has a bunch of comments in it to help you figure out what to do and to make this work. And I think it's data cell 7 lets you change the data, and you can change the data and then I think you have to do an inverse FFT and then an FFT, I think. Now, the interesting thing is that it's all done in complex math, and Excel's pretty good at complex math. It's not great. I've had people complain that it's got issues, but I don't care. I'm not really all that comfortable in complex math anyway, so you'll go figure it out. It's pretty easy. Now, QAM is cool because it changes the amplitude and the phase of the signal. Now, they do that in color TV too. Back in the olden days, they used to do it not digitally, they did it with an analog circuit. And so they modulated I and Q in analog and sent that out. And I did a color television signal in Credence using the Credence arbitrary waveform generator, which had a packet AWG, and that was pretty wild because I had to change the amplitude and the phase of each signal in order to get the colors that I needed for the color bar, and it was really fun. But what I want you to do is I want you to go to that website and download the Excel file. Now, I worked in Excel. I worked in a lot of things. I worked in something called the AWT. Hell, my very first tool I invented myself. I had a friend who was trying to get me to help a customer who wanted to be able to plot a wave. And Credence already had something called plot to VT240. Plot to VT240 plotted to a VT240, which was an old color monitor. But these guys in Asia didn't have a VT240, so he wanted a plot to VT100. Well, I was an expert at the VT100, and so I came up with a way to plot the VT100. So I've worked on the simplest, most basic DSP routines. So I had to plot the VT100. I used the AWT on Credence. I used to do DSP on the mixed signal waveform tool on the Next Test Lightning. I used the Schlumberger EXA, had a mixed signal tool that it was really cool. You drag your icons around, and that's how you did DSP. That was really cool. But Excel is a really good way to go because, there goes a boat. Excel is a really good way to go because everybody has it, and most companies will expect you to be able to use Excel. If you can't use Excel, bad for you. You really need to, when I worked at Credence, I didn't have to do it much. But when I worked at Maxim and Tektronix, I had to use it all the time. And I got really good at it, and you should too. Excel is very powerful. And so download the file, follow along. It's pretty easy to use. Now here I have a couple of waves that you can see in time domain of the wave that I've converted into QAM. And so the first one shows data of, I think it's an 8. You can see it changes the amplitude, but you can't really tell it changes the phase. Don't look for the phase. Look for the amplitude. Now the thing that is a hallmark of QAM is that unlike AM, when you look at the spectrum, you're going to see the sidebands are not the same. This is not like single sideband. Single sideband just tried to save energy by not transmitting a sideband. But in QAM, your sidebands end up differential. And that's just the way it is. It's just that way. It's weird. It's because it's in complex. So download the file, try it out, read the article, read all the documentation, and you'll learn all about QAM. It's really hard for you to learn it on a video, but if you go in and do the Excel, and come on, who doesn't have Excel? If you don't have Excel, too bad. I can't help you. But if you have Excel, I've opened up a ton of stuff for you to do, and you can have a good time with Excel. And it's like, I wasn't very good at math, and I learned how to do math just by having a calculator and playing with it. And you can do the same thing with Excel. So Excel can give you all kinds of stuff. I'm not a spokesman for Microsoft. I actually hate Microsoft, but I like Excel. It's very powerful. Anyway, that's it for now. This is Dan Bullard from the river. See you later.